Hi everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Crack the Code series presented by DevOps Live in partnership with GitLab. My name is Saumya Upadhyaya and I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager at GitLab. Today's topic is around accelerating and safeguarding your DevOps transformation with DevSecOps. The desire to shift left is growing significantly across DevOps organizations. But achieving true security and development integration is ever so difficult with a myriad of tools and processes that are already deeply entwined within organizations. Shifting left not only requires a new way of approaching security toolset, but also requires a mindset and cultural shift to integrate the work of security teams, empowering developers, and integrating dev, test, security, and QA. And our guest speaker for today is Nachu Subramanian, who has extensive hands-on experience in driving the adoption of cutting-edge tools and advanced technical solutions, and has excelled in various key roles such as Head of DevSecOps, Solution Architecture, Infrastructure, and Digital Transformation. Nachu is currently the Head of DevOps Engineering Center of Excellence for OCBC Bank, where he is responsible for implementing the cloud and DevOps strategy for OCBC Group in ASEAN and APAC. Prior to joining OCBC, Nachu was instrumental in the formation and operation of the DevOps engineering team at United Overseas Bank and the agile transformation of Credit Suisse digital private banking in APAC. Welcome, Nachu. So Nachu, let's get started. I briefly mentioned that the embarking on a DevSecOps journey requires a cultural shift in the organization. From your experience, can you talk about how one can plan and initiate that shift in their organizations?
Thank you very much for the introduction, Saumya. Good morning once again, everyone. Saumya brought up an interesting point about the cultural and mindset shift required for the DevOps journey. This is a key. I mean, I know that we talk about tools and technologies and processes as well, but then the most important for DevOps or DevSecOps journey is the culture shift or mindset shift, because we need to be ready to accept the disruption that is happening in our environment and change the way we work. Especially probably in the past, we used to do the application builds by manually, and also we might have done the application deployments manually as well. But then if we need to automate it, there's quite a lot of integrations required as well. For example, if we are doing the application builds using manual ways or scripts, right? Then we need to change from that, and also we also need to ensure that we are giving away some of our privileges, because when we move into the DevOps journey, right, some of our privileges will be taken away, especially for the developers. The privileges that they used to have in touching the SIT or UAT environment, or sometimes even production environment, might be taken away. So this kind of taking away their privileges doesn't mean that we are not making them effective. It's just that we are trying to automate those activities through the CI/CD/CT pipeline. So this is where we need to be ready for having the mindset that will enable us to understand the way in which our privileges are taken away, and then we are going to work on some new model in which things are automated or more streamlined, and then we are shifting left to ensure that we are delivering the applications or software faster, better, and cheaper. So this is one important area. And also another area where we need to look at the culture and mindset shift is something that whenever we are working on the cyber security or the solution architecture of the platform, right? We always decide that, okay, once I define my solution architecture or once I define my cybersecurity standards, we stick to that. We do not encourage to change it. But then with DevOps or DevSecOps journey, you might have to constantly change. So change is the only constant thing. So we may need to ensure that we are ready to accept the architecture level changes and also the cybersecurity policies or rules. Another area where we need to look at the culture changes, keeping it lean. I mean, I know in banking and many financial services, we have something called as maker, checker, review. It means everything that is done by someone has to be reviewed by somebody else. So that may not be the right suitable environment when we are implementing DevOps. Of course, maker, checker, review is required, but we need to look at keep it as lean as possible. We shouldn't be doing for every simple activity. We shouldn't be doing the maker, checker. So this is something that I would recommend, to keep it lean and continuously measure your improvement areas, because continuous improvement gives the better benefit of DevOps. So that's the culture and mindset shift that everybody needs to work on.
Right. So that's great. I think culture shift is inherent to DevOps transformations itself, but I'm sure you encountered a couple of challenges along the way. Can you walk us through some of the biggest challenges that organizations should be aware of when they're trying to integrate their Dev, Sec, and Ops teams together?
Yes, I've been through quite a lot of challenges, and it's very interesting that I managed to get through this by hard way. But I think for all the organizations that are adopting DevOps, they shouldn't be doing this in a hard way. They should understand from other DevSecOps experts in the market, and then try to get through these hardships in a better way. Some of the hardships that I have went through are, people are not ready to look at the disruptions that we are doing in our environment, so that we are able to deliver the applications faster and better. So they are always thinking that, okay, something is running okay, so I would stick to it. So that's again a culture and a mindset shift that was not initially possible. But then over the period, what I did is I did some proof of concept for the DevOps application onboarding. And then I did showcase this consistently to all the stakeholders, and then got the necessary buy-in, because getting the buy-in from the stakeholders is the most difficult part when it comes to DevOps. So that's first challenge that I went through. And then I worked very closely with the stakeholders, and then consistently showcase them on how the DevOps has improved their software development lifecycle. And also, I did encounter some of the tools or softwares being used are not supporting the necessary integrations that I was looking for. For example, right, some tools are fully GUI based. And so if we are trying to integrate from one tool to another tool, GUI based integration are not that effective. So that's why I always prefer to choose the softwares that are that are supporting either API or a command line interface. So some of the companies or some of the clients that I have worked in the past, they were not ready to change the software that they were using just because they are so comfortable in their current tool. So this is something that was not good for our DevOps journey in the long run. So this is where I had to work closely with them, convince them, saying that, okay, if you use the command line interface or API, you can do your build and deployments much faster and easier. So you don't need to do this build and deployment manually using GUI. So this is another challenge that I went through. And then one another area that one another challenge that I went through, especially for DevSecOps, is usually the cybersecurity team or information security team is very, very lean, and their portfolio is quite big, but generally they are very lean compared to the development team or the DevOps team. So they are not able to keep up with the pace that the development team is doing their developments. So this is where we shouldn't treat the cybersecurity team or the DevSecOps engineers as a separate team. They should be part of the development organization as well. So right now, what we have done in our recent implementations are, we bring in one DevSecOps engineer or cybersecurity engineer as part of every major application program, and then they will be working very closely with the development team to ensure that they are keeping up with the pace of the software development which is currently going on. So that's one area. And then last but not least is the free and open source vulnerabilities. So generally, we see that the number of free and open source usage is going high and high. Recently, I just read that one of the surveys said that the number of Java struts and the number of NPM public libraries being used has crossed 226 billion downloads in 2019 only. It's 226 billion in 2019 only. Okay, so that's the level of free and open source vulnerabilities, the free and open source libraries that we are using. And when we are using more and more free and open source libraries, it also comes with the huge number of vulnerabilities as well. So we need to ensure that we are continuously scanning and then mitigating these vulnerabilities, especially the pace at which the exploiters are exploiting the newly released libraries is very, very fast. And the application development team and the cybersecurity team need to be more faster than the these hackers, and then mitigate these risks faster than the pace the vulnerabilities are coming up. So that's another challenge that we need to look at as well.
Right. So that makes absolute sense. So you did mention earlier about how developers are concerned about losing control to their test environments and so on. And you also did bring up a good point about the open source vulnerabilities need to be caught much early on in the process. So that brings me to my next question on how important is it to is test automation and test automation tools in the entire DevSecOps journey so that you can mitigate a bunch of these challenges that you actually spoke about?
Yeah, there's a very commonly used term called as shift left. Of course, we use shift left for building and deployments, but it is more appropriate for testing, especially when we shift left our unit testing and then the functional testing, right? And we do automate these test cases using test automation tools. Then we will be able to complete all these test cases much earlier in our software development lifecycle, and then have more time for the further security related or deployment related activities. So this is where we need to ensure that we are doing the unit test cases as part of the code build itself. I'm pretty sure many of the organizations are now asking the developers to write their unit test cases, and then they are checking the code coverage as part of their code build itself. If the code coverage falls below certain percentage, then they're asking the developers to ensure that they are having the right test cases for all the lines of code. So on an average, around 70 to 75% code coverage is a good number to start with. So every company is pushing their unit test cases to be, in the percentage of unit test cases to be improved, and also they are trying to automate the functional test cases as well, because previously we used to do the functional test cases only in the UAT environment, but now with the test automation tools available in the market, both open source test automation tools and the paid test automation tools, we are able to do the functional test cases at the dev or SIT environment itself. And then in the UAT environment, we are only doing those edge cases that cannot be done or that need double or triple confirmations by the manual testers. So most of these functional test cases can be shift left, and then it can be done at the dev and SIT environment itself, and then we are able to complete this automated test cases much faster. And also, this is not only for functional tests and unit tests. This is also applicable for various other tests like the performance test or load test, and also on the penetration test as well. So we do not need to wait for things to be in our UAT or sandbox environment to do these penetration tests or the performance test. If we automate this, we can do this in our much earlier much earlier stage of our software development life cycle. So this is very, very important to ensure that we are doing the test cases automated using the test automation tools.
That's right. That's absolutely the best practices that are followed, across the board as well in other industries as well. So let's talk about banking, right? So you worked in some really large banks in your career. Can you give us some examples of best DevSecOps practices that is implemented across leading banks, specifically in the APAC region?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I would like to bring up 3 or 4 important points. First one, and for the foremost one, is the solution architecture design. So although though we look at DevSecOps as a key area for developers, it is also very important that we do design our solution architecture by ensuring that we are mitigating all possible risks during the design stage itself. So this is something that we need to look at it, especially when we are looking at the solution architecture design. We need to look at each and every layer of the solution architecture, and then look at that with the security perspective. So is my network layer secure? Is my data layer secure? I mean, each and every layer we need to ensure that we are having the necessary security review done. And it is continuously done. So if we are designing the solution architecture once, it doesn't mean that, okay, we have done it and then it doesn't need any more changes at all. Okay. So previously we have heard the terms like continuous integration or continuous deployment. There's also something called as continuous architecture design review. So we need to consistently monitor the architecture design, and then if need be, we need to modify the architecture design as well. So that's one good DevSecOps practice that we need to look at. The second one is the secure code review and secure binary review. So source code review is in other terms. So generally we do write source code, and then we do peer review. But then that's just eyeball level review, which may not be good enough at the pace of cybersecurity threats coming up now. So we need to have automated SAST, static code analysis, and DAST, dynamic code analysis tools. And also to go one step further, it's IAST, interactive application security testing. So these three areas are something that we need to look at by whenever a developer write a code and then he checks in the code into the source code repository. Immediately our static code analysis tool should do the review. And then once the code is built and then a binary is created, and then during that time also we need to do a binary level security scanning. And then last but not least, when we are downloading any third-party libraries, instead of downloading it and then identifying the security vulnerabilities in our environment, before we download it, we need to ensure that we are identifying the security threats while downloading itself, and then only if it is clean, then we should allow the development team to use those security vulnerabilities, secure libraries. And then last but not least is the continuous compliance. So all these that I mentioned, right, we need to ensure that we are continuously monitoring it, and then we are mitigating those vulnerabilities or those risk areas consistently. That's something that we need to take a look at it. So these are the important practices that I have followed in the banking and financial services industries.
Okay, that's great. And the last point that you mentioned actually brings me to my next question, which is around continuous compliance and monitoring. So banks, as everybody is aware, are known to be required to adhere to tons of compliance regulations, right? Can you talk about how continuous compliance and monitoring helps to consistently improve the DevSecOps maturity?
Yes, sure. So this is a very interesting question, especially for banking and financial services. We have many regulatory compliance to be followed, especially for Singapore banks. They need to follow the Monetary Authority of Singapore policies and guidelines, and also various other UK, US, and other region-related compliance and regulatory policies to be followed as well. So if we just say that, okay, follow this policy, nobody is able to monitor it and then and then fix the issues, because we are giving a way for the issues to leak and then back fixing it, which is not the right way. So in this case, we need to have right monitoring capabilities to ensure that we are consistently following those compliance and regulatory guidelines. For example, we need to have the necessary continuous compliance tools or application performance monitoring tools, and any monitoring tools that will ensure that all these risk and compliance related requirements are continuously monitored, and then it is ensured that, okay, these regulatory policies are followed throughout. I'll just take a good example, right? Let's say if I want to ensure that none of the developers should be touching the production environment, only the operations team should be touching the production environment. But we do give privileges only to the operations team, but the developers' privileges are revoked. But then, what if somebody accidentally gives access to the development team guy? So we need to ensure that we create an Active Directory group and then tag only the operations team in that Active Directory group, and then only that Active Directory group should be allowed to touch the production. So this is where privilege ID management and monitoring of these privilege ID is very, very important. And then we do, in case if some of the developers are given access to this production environment, then we have to immediately notify it and then automatically mitigate this risk. So this is just an example. So we need to ensure that we are continuously monitoring these privilege IDs or any security policies that has to be complied, and then we notify it and then fix it in case if the compliance is not met, or if there's a breach in the compliance. So that's how we can ensure that we are monitoring and then fixing these compliance related breaches.
Right. So absolutely, the separation of duties, as you mentioned, is I think the basis of compliance, so to say, or the starting point of compliance. Thank you so much, Nachu. This was a very, very informative session. And thank you all for tuning in to the episode 5 of Crack the Code with DevOps Live and GitLab. I hope you found this session useful. Thank you.